Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Expert Witness Show. I am your host, David Smith, and today's podcast is brought to you by Alpine Engineering and Design, your first call when looking for a mechanical engineering expert witness. Now, today I wanted to talk about accidents that should never happen, because let's be honest, there are quite a few of those. Uh, And this tends to be a reoccurring theme when we're talking about a lot of these accidents and cases that result out of them, uh, and what companies can and should be doing to prevent these uh, really preventable accidents that should never be happening. And the answer to what they should be doing is a design safety review. It's a simple process that's outlined in a couple of different ANSI standards that guides them through the process of looking at and evaluating their equipment to make sure that they're meeting all the standards, that they've considered all the hazards, that they've identified all the hazards, and taken steps to reduce those to an acceptable level of risk. And I wanted to illustrate this today with a story about a rear loader garbage truck, because it's something that to me it's really frustrating, because it's so simple. If you go through the process, even if you're not really even trying that hard, if you go through the process, you can fix a lot of these accidents before they ever happen. But for some reason, still a lot of companies decide not to do it. So here's the story. It was later in the day, towards the end of a shift, and this garbage collector was, riding on the back of a rear loader garbage truck, as they do, right? So these are the ones where you have one person driving the truck and one person riding near the back on a step, and they will go from house to house or from company to company. In this case, they were working on residential units, and he would get off his step, roll the cart around to the back, collect it or attach it to the tipper, which would dump it into the hopper of the rear loader garbage truck, and he would then take the cart back to the curb, get back on the truck, and go to the next house. And as he was doing this, on this day, this particular time, he was getting back on his step to go to the next house. And as he did that, he stumbled or slipped a little bit and grabbed one handle with his left hand and went for the other handle with his right hand, but missed. But instead of falling completely off the truck, he grabbed just what he could that was over there. And unfortunately for this operator, the thing that was over there was a hole, a service opening for one of the hydraulic cylinders that operates these big packer panels that come down with tremendous force, collect the garbage, and scoop it all up into the hopper, right? And that's why these trucks are so popular, is because they can compact the garbage, and so you can collect a lot more of it before you have to go to the dump. But to do that, it takes a tremendous amount of force supplied by these hydraulic cylinders. And so our operator had slipped, and his hand grabbed into this service hole just as the packer panels were coming down. And as he was riding his feet, getting them back onto the step, that panel came down and severed all four of the fingers on his right hand. And completely severed them, and they were not able to be reattached. And it's sad, because this was so preventable. If they had gone through this design safety review process, there were several things in the process that would have prevented this. The first one was probably that you look at different standards that the equipment you're designing has to meet. And there are standards for refuse equipment, one of which is the ANSI Z245 standard. And in that standard, it states that service openings that expose pinch points shall be protected by a cover removable by hand tools. Right? So that's not just a cover, it's a very specific cover over pinch points for service openings, and it has to be removable by hand tools. It's not one that can just be removed. You just open up a cover and put it down. It's one that you have to have a tool, a screwdriver, a wrench, something to take it off so that it's not easy to remove and easy to gain access to. Something that they wouldn't do out in the field because it's simply more convenient to not have it there, right? So it's something that is difficult to defeat, a safety measure that is difficult to defeat. And so if they had gone through the standards and looked at their equipment, they would have noticed that, hey, there is a service opening that is not guarded. We, according to the standard, must guard this service opening with a cover that can only be removed with hand tools, or that requires hand tools to remove it. But they apparently didn't do that. The next thing, if they had gone through this design safety review, is that you have to identify the hazards. And in doing that, you look at your piece of equipment and you think, what are all of the ways that somebody could get hurt using this, either how it's supposed to be used or by reasonably foreseeable misuses? And had they done that, they probably would have looked at this and said, you know what, we've got these two handles that the operator is supposed to hold on to. And mere inches away from the right hand handle, there's this service opening with a pinch point. And it's almost as easy to grab into that service opening as it is to grab the actual handle. It's the right spacing, it's the right distance, there's not really anything in the way. They should have seen that when doing a hazard analysis and thought, wow, somebody really could put their hand in that. And if they do, this panel's going to come down and chop their hand off. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. It's simple enough that all it takes is somebody looking for the hazard. If you're not looking for it, oftentimes you're not going to see it. But if you take the time to go through this process, these things are easy to see, and they're easy to fix, and they prevent these accidents that really shouldn't happen. And so in this case, you can identify the hazard and say, wow, there's this pinch point. And then you can, by identifying the hazard, then you can then assess the risk by determining, how likely is somebody to get hurt, and then how bad are they going to get hurt if they are subjected to this hazard. And how bad are they going to get hurt? They're going to lose a hand or part of their hand. So that's going to be a serious or catastrophic harm. Because garbage men with one hand have a really hard time doing their job. The next thing, how likely are they to get hurt? You've got to have your hand in there, and the panels have got to be moving. But given how close they are to the actual handle, and how easy it is to get your hand in there, and how convenient and frankly comfortable it is, it's really quite foreseeable, very likely that someone's going to put their hand there from time to time. And when they do, they're subjected to a hazard. So it's one of those things where it was, had they taken the time to think about it, to figure out that these hazards were there, it was a simple matter to put a guard on to cover the service opening. Something that was recommended by the standard, something that should have been done had they taken any time to assess the risks, and something that had they done it, would have saved this operator's hand. Would have, I don't know exactly how that affected his life, but I can tell you there's a lot that I would do to save my right hand. And so with that, that's, I guess, in a way, I appreciate the attorneys that take on these cases and encourage, if that's the right word, or force these companies to take a little bit closer look at their equipment, because for some reason so many companies fail to do that in their initial design process and won't do it until they're coerced, made to do it by legal means. So thank you for your work on that. So if you're working on a case that involves something like this with a hazard that really should have been designed out or guarded against early in the design process, let's talk and see what we can do to get some results and encourage these companies to do the right thing. Thanks.